Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, and today's show is going to be more of an introduction of myself to the audience because I'm not sure I've really properly introduced myself to everyone and let you kind of know a little bit about me and my background. So we can start with I'm originally from Southern California and grew up there. I went to San Diego State University for my bachelor's in economics. And kind of funny story about that is I was in my start of my junior year and I went to my guidance counselor and I said, what degrees can I get with my class load that I already have and get out of here in 4 years? And the guidance counselor looked at my records and said, economics or public administration. And I knew a lot of people that were doing public administration and decided that just didn't seem like me. So I naturally chose the harder path of economics and graduated in 4 years by taking summer classes, winter classes. Basically, if there were classes offered for a session, I was in there taking them. I also, funny thing about my undergrad was that I did have a job. So one of the things I did was I scheduled my classes so that all of them were on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I had 4-day weekends every week, but that also meant I had 4-day weekends to work every single week. So I was always working. And in college, you do odd jobs, or I was working retail selling electronics. So I worked retail and I was always working all weekend, evenings, and Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were just all school because Tuesdays and Thursdays. I had 4 or 5 classes all day, all in a 2-day schedule. So it was rough, but made it work. And the trade-off was usually worth it, having a lot more free time. But the days I was on campus were pretty rough. After I finished my degree, I kind of was struggling with what to do with my life. So I joined the United States Army as enlisted. I tried to join the Army going in off the street into OCS as an officer because I had my degree. But one of the problems I ran into was when I applied at the end of the fiscal year, so there were no slots available. So then the next month I was like, oh, new fiscal year should be easy. Now, because they had already front loaded all the slots for the first month with the overflow of the previous month. And I just started seeing this as a trend. So I just decided I'll go enlisted, signed up for Special Forces. And when I went through the Special Forces preparation course, I realized I did not have the skills. The instructors were saying all the time, Special Forces isn't for everyone. And I realized that it wasn't for me. I rang the bell. I voluntarily withdrew. I quit, choose your term, whatever it may be. But that was a choice that I made and I was comfortable with it. I went down the street to the 82nd Airborne Division where I deployed 3 times in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. After my time was up at the 82nd, I went to the Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia, where I was starting out to be an instructor, but blew out my shoulder and instructor training and was then put in operations. It was at that point where I realized I need to decide, do I want to go make this a career, or do I want to get out and go live a life? Because this was right when the global war on terrorism was really big and constant deployments were happening. And I had already done multiple deployments. So I decided I was going to get out, and I had a 3-year assignment at Fort Benning, Georgia. So I decided then to start figuring out what's my next step once I get out. And I had applied to and got into grad school to pursue my MBA, Master's of Business Administration at Auburn University, which was 45 minutes away from Fort Benning, Georgia. So For the last 2 years I was on active duty, I was also completing my master's degree. So when I graduated with my master's degree, I was also getting out of the military. So I thought I had it made. It was thought easy street, jobs were going to be lined up at the door for me. Boy, was I wrong on that one. I got out not knowing anything, not really even knowing how to write a resume. And my first job out of the military was working at the Auburn University Student Athlete Library, telling athletes to be quiet and keep the library quiet. And I considered that a fortunate job that I did get because it was it was a struggle to adapt to civilian life from the military. And through working in that job and talking to people and just doing the right things, showing up on time, talking to people and with influence and authority, I worked my way up to being tech support for the library for the student athletes. And I was able to get a little bit of a promotion, a little bit more money. And in the meantime, I was still applying for jobs in town, and I found a small specialty retailer that sold overpriced clothes to college students across the Southeast. And I got a job there as managing their e-commerce division and working on the dealing with their warranty stuff, their warranty returns and defects. I built the program up with the e-commerce side. I started figuring out best practices, started applying some of the Six Sigma methodology I learned in my master's program, and eventually my wife and I decided Auburn is not where we wanted to stay the rest of our lives. So we picked up and moved to Tennessee. When we moved to Tennessee, started all over again looking for jobs. Except this time I looked at the federal government and I wound up getting a job with the VA, with the Department of Veterans Affairs, working in a administrative capacity. I quickly learned that they had a Six Sigma program there, so found out who was in charge of it, went to them and told them, "Hey, I got my green belt already from my master's program. I want to do more. I want to learn more." And through that, I was selected to go to the Six Sigma black belt training and also become a Lean Six Sigma black belt sponsored by the VA. Throughout all this advanced training, I was also teaching Six Sigma yellow and green belt courses throughout the VA in my building. I was also asked to help with projects and, lead projects, guide projects, just be one of the Six Sigma experts in the building because there was really only one person whose job it was to be the Six Sigma person. So after a while there, I realized there was no career progression. There were a lot of internal issues, politics, things like that. So I decided to go out on the private sector and see what that was like and started working contract work. And when I say contract work, I mean these are the 6-month contracts, and these are the contracts where they can tell you, "We don't like the color of your socks. Go home, call the contracting company up and pick out somebody new." There was no stability in those roles, but I have said for a long time, most PM jobs require 3 to 5 years of experience. Well, how do you get that experience if it's an entry level role? So it's a chicken or egg situation. And if anybody in the audience has gone through this, you're shaking your head going, been there, done that. And so you got to take these not so great contracting roles. The first one was working in governance and working as a project auditor for very senior level PMs who have been doing this for years. And one of the things I took pride in was whenever I would meet with the senior PM and I'd be going through their project, I would tell them, I don't care about the checklist. I care about your experience and your knowledge. And if you can convince me why you don't need this artifact in your documentation, I'm signing off on that you don't need it. And then the other thing I did was whenever I had an opportunity to talk to some of these PMs who had years of experience, most of them had specializations of some sort, I would ask them 2 or 3 questions about business of what I needed from their projects, but I would also relate that and add 2 or 3 questions for my own personal knowledge based off of their expertise to get lessons learned and practical knowledge from the people who have been doing this for a long time and experts. That's how you learn is you get mentors and you ask questions. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do to say, I don't know how to do this or I don't know what I'm doing. But you find ways to ask them questions and learn. And sometimes you don't even let them know that you're learning from them. Sometimes you point straight up say, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. There's no shame or humility in either one of those situations because you should be open to admitting what you don't know. And if somebody wants to help you, they're happy to share what they do know. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this show as a whole is I've got a lot of experience. I've done a lot of different things and I want to bring that back. I want to bring that around to the audience. And I've got a lot of really cool people that I know, and I'm building that Rolodex as I go along with this show of, hey, here's somebody interesting. Here's somebody with a great story. Here's somebody with a diverse background. Let's learn from them. Let's teach what they know and put them on a pedestal a little bit for 45 minutes or an hour and let them teach us what they know best. You know, that's what I'm trying to use this platform for is not to elevate. Yes, it's going to elevate my profile, but it's also to elevate those around me. So once that contract wrapped up, I wound up being unemployed for a little bit and had to learn how to network, how to build those relationships, how to do this because that first contract job was a friend of mine knew a recruiter who was looking for somebody and it just kind of fell into my lap. Now I'm laid off between contracts and don't have anything. So I started going to events, started reaching out to people, started figuring out how this whole thing works. And I wound up landing a role with a healthcare company. And I don't know for sure, but one of the things that was coincidental was I was in a mentoring program where I was being mentored by somebody who was a mid level executive at this healthcare company. He had been in the military. He got his degree at Auburn. So we had a lot in common. And when I told him, hey, I got this opportunity on this team with this company, with the same company you're at, he didn't hesitate to send an email. And that may have been the difference between me and other people is I knew somebody on the inside who was influential, who vouched for me. So I got that contract role. I was working for a healthcare company on the acquisitions team where we bought and sold hospitals. And one of the things I learned that I take with me in every project is we always talk about implementations and we do the implementations and the cutovers during downtime. Well, how do you implement a new healthcare system or a new time clock system in a hospital that never closes? You have to pick a time and date with a crystal ball saying, hey, I think this 8-hour shift or 10-hour, 12-hour shift from 8 to 8 on Wednesday, the 14th, I think that's going to be the slow time. And that's when we're going to do the cutover. So we make the preparations to go everything onto paper, do all the different ways to manually adjust everything for that shift. But we have to have our stuff so locked up tight that we cannot go a minute over of downtime to the next shift because if you go a minute over to the next shift, guess what happens? That entire next shift is down too. So this was something I learned very quickly was when you're dealing with when you're dealing with projects that don't have downtime, picking a time and date on an arbitrary board, you can't predict the future. You don't know, especially with hospitals, if there's going to be a 10-car pileup in your middle of your downtime and this hospital is just running crazy during your downtime, or if they see 3 patients in that entire shift. So it was a really eye-opening experience, seeing the private side of healthcare, seeing how much stuff in a hospital is networked and electronic versus nothing being manual, just all those different things. And then that contract was coming to a close and me and my family had decided to move to Kentucky. Now, one of the things I did was before we made this decision as a family, I had started to network around a little bit through using LinkedIn. This is pre-COVID, about 2019. So the networking world is a little bit different. But what I did was I found anybody that I could find that had some type of common bond with me, whether it was military, college we went to, something. And I had a message that I sent to different people, and I reached out to a recruiter who lived in the same town we were moving to in Kentucky. And I said, hey, she's a recruiter. Let me reach out to her. Lucky for me, her son was named Trevor and had just joined the army. So she reached out and we started talking, and I told her that we were moving there. I know nobody, I'm prior military, everything else. And she starts sending out emails introducing me to all of her people that she knows because she was very influential in the military and veteran community here in town. And so before I knew it, I had probably 20 different email conversations going on with people in her network. And the way I did this was every introduction, prompt reply, exchange emails back and forth. Then I'd say, hey, let's get on a call and talk. Get to know them a little bit, find out what they do those exploratory calls, find out what it is that they do, and then tell them, look, the most important, the single most valuable thing I can tell anybody in the job search is don't go into conversations asking for things. Tell them you want to get to know these people for them. And if they have the ability to help you, you would appreciate it, but don't go in asking for anything. Ask for their time and ask for their story. So I couldn't even tell you how many different calls I had, how many different email chains I had, but through somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, I wound up with a role with a very respected consulting firm, and I had the offer in hand. They sponsored my security clearance to get one because I needed it for the role. They paid for my move, and this was all without even setting foot in the state of Kentucky because I had networked, I had made enough people feel confident with my skill set and my knowledge that they felt comfortable referring me so that when the time came for me to sell myself, I could. And we moved. I had that role doing as a government contractor. I worked on a software project. Some personalities clashed. Something happened. I don't know. But then I was moved to a different side of the company where I was working directly for the United States Army, managing the publications program for the U.S. Army Cadet Command. And that's the command. The Cadet Command is all of the ROTC and junior ROTC programs across the country. I managed all the publications. I made sure that all of the colleges got their certificates, made sure all the regulations were up to date, all the forms were up to date, created a lot of different workflows and streamlines because if you've ever worked with the military or the government, you know that especially with the military, there's always a book for something. There's always a form for something. And there are always rules that govern those forms and those books. So I created some spreadsheets and some workflows to automate the review processes and prompt timelines based off of best practices so that we could kind of get everything current because when I got there, nothing was current. And while I'm there, I get recruited to work for a security company. Now, I had already planned to start casually looking because the contract was up for renewal and there were grumblings that the company I was working for was not going to be on the renewal of the contract. And I decided I did not want to take the chance on that. So this other opportunity popped up. I interviewed. I really liked the team. I really liked the group that I was working with. And I took that role with the security company and come to find out I'm on an innovation team where we're literally our sole focus is doing things that have never been done before. I got tasked with managing the interior drone project where I brought a drone over from Israel and brought it to the US, which in and of itself was a whole bunch of red tape with the government and Defense Department and all that stuff. Then once I brought it over, I had to take it through full length testing. So once we got it installed, I had to do testing on it to validate everything that the company said was true. And then I used my mind to come up with crazy ideas of things that they didn't say it could do. Like one of the examples is the drone had people detection software where it would detect a person and draw a box around it. And I thought, hey, does it detect people sitting or laying down on the ground? So while I'm doing this comprehensive testing, I decided, let me fly it with me laying down on the ground, both face up and face down. And I presented it like I had fallen down or collapsed or something like that, not just laying flat like I'm going to sleep. And funny story about that is that I found out the engineers saw this footage, and for about a week, me laying on the ground looking like I was dead was the wallpaper for some engineers in Israel because they just thought it was hysterical. And then I had to build out the use cases, work with our sales team to meet with some preferred vendors or preferred customers to find out, is this something they were interested in? Once I adjusted my use cases based off of what their needs were and everything else, we wound up going through the paces, getting this thing approved through the sales process, got 3 pilot partners, and then resulted in the first commercial sale of the product in the US. Now, the company went out of business, I think in 2024. So it obviously didn't come to fruition in terms of a commercial sale, but it was a project where I was doing something that had literally never been done before in this country. And then I was also rewarded by having 3 ideas that I had created and worked with our intellectual property and legal teams to get my name on 3 US patents as a co-inventor. And that's no shortage of work by all the people involved, but it just goes to the idea that concepts become reality and then ideas are recognized. And once there was some internal shakeups and buyouts with that company, I found myself unemployed again due to layoff. And I posted on LinkedIn that I was out of work. A friend of mine reached out and said, "Hey, I got this job. I'm interviewing for it. I don't really know that I want it, but you obviously need work. You're qualified for it. Let me refer you." And I wound up getting referred and got that role. And that kind of goes back to that whole networking piece. And it's building relationships, not just networking. It's do you know people in your network that vouch for you? Or do you just collect a bunch of people in your network on LinkedIn and you don't talk to any of them? There's value in knowing some of the people that you can trust and that trust you, because it's just as important to ask for things as it is to give things. I've made countless introductions and I've done a lot of charity work and nonprofit work and given of my time because it was recently told to me that when you give, you get. And I've been giving a lot, trying to just make things better. That's why this show exists. There's a lot of time wrapped up in every episode. There's a lot of time wrapped up in coordinating guests, getting guests, prepping for guests, doing all those different things to give back to the community, to give the audience something that they didn't already have, to give you project management content that I say is not boring, because as a whole, PMs are not the most exciting bunch. And my goal is to create a fun show with entertaining guests, because I don't like boring shows. I don't want to listen to a boring show. You're probably getting bored hearing my story right now, but I feel it's important to let you know where I come from and my background. So I got that software development role. I was brought on, spent about 10 months with them doing the go live and launch of that software for a state government. Then I got laid off again. And that's led me to something that I've been working on recently, which is consulting and coaching with my own company, Process Driven Performance Consulting. I do project management and process improvement coaching, consulting. I do project management mentoring and coaching as well. And one of the things I wanted to touch on in this episode as well is I've been asked, why is the show called The Disgruntled PM if I'm not an angry person? And I called it that because every PM I've ever known has some level of disgruntlement because nobody understands our profession. Nobody understands what we do. They always think of it as an afterthought, or it's another thing that somebody else does, and we're just glorified note takers, meeting schedulers, and occasionally we might run a meeting, but we run it from an agenda that magically appears. And I just kind of thought about it. I'm like, every PM is disgruntled in their own way. And this kind of this name kind of encapsulates what the profession is. It's a lot of disgruntled people making it look easy, making things happen behind the scenes. And it's a thankless job in a lot of aspects because we don't get recognized for all the work that we truly do. Because when the project is wrapped, we move on to the next one. We very rarely celebrate the wins, celebrate the victories, take that victory lap for what we did. And we don't we don't publicize, oh, hey, I started off my day with an agenda or with the schedule of what I plan to get done. And everything on my list got pushed to next week because 3 emails came in that just lit fires, and then change requests, and then meetings on top of taskings that didn't exactly that weren't supposed to be done that I now have to worry about. All of that stuff is the daily life of a PM. No 2 days are the same. No 2 days go as planned. And that's where that disgruntlement piece comes in, because we don't have a predictable job. We don't have a predictable schedule. If we have a go live, you give up a lot of the times you give up your life for that go live because you've got to be making sure that everything goes according to plan. And when it doesn't, you've got to be there to make those phone calls, to triage, to make sure that you've got the experts on hand to troubleshoot. And then once you've got it just where you think it's ready to go and everything is running smoothly, you got to keep your phone on to make sure nobody calls and says everything fell apart 12 hours after we went live. So that's kind of where the title came in, is that disgruntlement. It's not that this is an angry show. Obviously, I'm not, well, I am an angry person, but not outwardly angry at everything. And that's kind of the genesis of the title of the show. And this brings me to my last thing, which is I am excited to announce that I've launched a Patreon for the show. Now, this is a chance for me to help fund the show, to put money back into it for all the different things like the recording software that I pay for, my distribution, upgrade equipment, pay for some services that would help me out with creating workflows better, creating better experience for the guests that come on. All those things cost money. And frankly, I don't have it. I'm footing the bill for all this myself, and I'm asking the audience to help me out a little bit, but I'm not asking you just to fund this and I'm not giving anything in return. I've got 2 tiers currently: the low hanging fruit tier, which is $1 a month, which, yes, that is, you're just donating to the show to help me out. That's literally all it is $1 a month, and it's called low hanging fruit for obvious reasons. And then I have the $5 a month drinking the Kool-Aid tier. Now, this is the one where I'm going to give you something for your money, because every guest, from Sheriff Pat Melton all the way through to Craig Baker, and every guest that comes on after this episode, every guest that I've had on and I'm going to have on records a bonus episode, which is anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And that's where we take what we discussed in the main episode and I ask them pointed questions for answers of techniques, tips, tricks, lessons learned that they can impart to the audience based off of their expertise. This is where you really can become a better skilled PM or a better skilled person based off of these audience or these guests and everything they've done in their careers. I'm only getting bigger and better guests. I'm only getting bigger and better experiences for you. And I can tell you right now, I have a lot of guests already recorded, and you do not want to miss some of these bonus episodes because there is just incredible information in them. I've had to go back and listen to them myself to learn from these guests because there's just such valuable content coming out of these people. So with that, go to Patreon, find me, find the Disgruntled PM podcast. I'll have links in the show notes. And if you find value in the show and you want to level up your knowledge, please subscribe and support the show and support me. That's how I'm going to help this thing grow. Also, if you're enjoying the content, share it with a friend, share it with 3 friends. Let everybody know how much you're enjoying this show, because I'm only one person. I can promote it, and I'm trying to. In fact, I went to the bank had to deal with some stuff with my business account, and I was talking to my banker, and he overheard me talking about the show with lining up a guest on the phone. And he asked me about the show, and I told him, and he subscribed right then and there to the show because he found it, he thought it was interesting. And then fast forward a week later, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, I really enjoyed that interview with Craig Baker. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I'm not a project manager." You know, that's what I'm trying to do is impact change. And it's got to be through, it can't just be through me. I need the audience to help me with this. So like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell 3 or 4 friends if you like it, and help me grow this show because it's here for the audience to give back. It's here to give back to the audience. It's not here to make me rich. I mean, that'd be a nice side effect if this can be a full-time job and everything else, but that's not happening for a very long time. I'm not planning on it. My goal at this point is to cover costs and break even and bring value and get some great guests for you. So with that, I'll make my case again. Like, subscribe, follow. If you want to learn more about my coaching, consulting, process improvement services, reach out. Uh, Follow the show on all the platforms. Like and subscribe. Patreon link is in the show notes. And with that, may all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the Disgruntled PM.